is to explain, and then at the end of chapter 2 you're saying, and this is the gap. I don't know how domestic violence impacts this specific population, and that's my gap in the study. Hope that makes sense. So chapter 3 then goes on to, you kind of just, it's kind of, what I want to help you with is, it seems a bit redundant, some of these topics, when you're writing them over and over again, but I promise you, at the end they flow, and they make sense at the end when you're finished. But chapter 3, again, like chapter 2, it discussed the purpose of the study. Oh, like chapter 1, sorry. Purpose of the study, the research question, research design. But then it starts getting into your target population and your sample and the procedures you use to collect data and data analysis. And let me give you some hints. So chapter 3, that information is going to come from data collection and contacting your participants and doing all that stuff. We talked about the IRB board before. All of this has to be approved by IRB before you can start collecting data and doing reaching out to any participants. But for site, like if you're doing something at a church, if you plan on collecting data from a church or a facility of some sort, a club, a bar, wherever you're going to get your participants from, you have to define that to the IRB, and you have to go to those sites to get approval so that you can submit that to IRB. Don't be like me and didn't think I could reach out to anybody until I had an IRB approval. No, you have to have a site letter signed by the site to get that approved before, and attach that to your IRB application so they can say, hey, this researcher has approval from this site to gather, collect data, if that makes sense. So hopefully I'm not using you, but IRB and chapter 3 for me go together. So you can't really write chapter 3 or start even collecting data until IRB has said, yay, this is good, you can move forward. And your committee, depending on your school, how approval process works. I know mine, I had to do a presentation for the committee to show them what I was, how I was going to carry out my data collection and my data analysis and all of those type of things. And so another thing I wanted to cover in data analysis, like what procedure, what research design are you going to use to collect your data? Are you going to do a qualitative design or a quantitative design or a mixed method design? And you can look those up, but you have to select it. You have to select one that best fits your research question and research topic. Kind of what goal are you trying to achieve from using with your topic? With the lived experiences of people who have experienced domestic violence who are interracially mixed in West Virginia, you want to know, okay, well, what do I want to get out of that? And that's where you would start to look for your research design. Like, for me, I used grounded theory. I was trying to develop a process for why people did what they did. So you have to look up research designs for your own study. So I won't go into that. But, okay, so chapter 3 is kind of, you start introducing your population, your sample size, your instruments you're going to use. When I say that, that's kind of like, are you going to do a survey? Are you going to do interviews? Are you going to, what is your role as the researcher going to be doing this process? So chapter 2 is like talking about, okay, I'm studying these people. I'm going to use this method to study them. I'm going to analyze them with this method. So that's what chapter 3 is. It's just talking about all of those things, and then any ethical considerations that you should have thought of or that you found while you were collecting data, or to protect your participants. And then you're going to summarize that chapter 3, and then on to chapter 4. Chapter 3 to me wasn't that difficult. I must say that it wasn't that difficult. And I want to go back to chapter 2. let me warn you about the drafts. You're gonna have draft after 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 draft, draft. I hear my mentor saying, still, just remember, it's still not finished, but draft after draft. And I'm not trying to be funny, but chapter 2 takes work. People get stressed about it, but once you finish it, it's awesome. I have to say that. Chapter 3 didn't take me that long. I remember. Chapter 1 didn't really take me that long. Chapter 4 was a little challenging, like chapter 2, because again, it's all about organization. It's about presenting your data. You're presenting your data here. You're introducing the study and the researcher. You're giving a description of the sample, the researcher method applied to data analysis, presentation of the data and the results. Yeah, this is where you talk about all the information you found. You put in the narratives that some of the participants provided during your interviews. You want to remember to keep your participants anonymous. That involves that informed consent. You'll sign all of that stuff. Informed consent is just giving the research participants kind of an overview of the study and what you're going to be talking about, what their role is, what your role is, how you're going to protect them from their names not being provided in the dissertation, any information that they talk about that should be, no names should be mentioned, how you're going to de-identify them. That's what you're going to capture in your informed consent. And all of that's going to be signed before you even do an interview, before you do interviews or before you start collecting data. You want to make sure you get your informed consent signed. Again, this is all stuff you probably won't remember, but this video will be here for you to keep in your pocket. And share with your dissertation students. And just remember, the process can be frustrating. It can be a lonely process. It has nothing to do with you, your intelligence, your writing skills. I do know that, stick with the APA handbook. There's a new one coming out on 07. I don't know when it's coming out. But that one is coming out. And so our last chapter is chapter 5. Chapter 5 wasn't that difficult. It reminded me of chapter 3, kind of, and chapter 1. Because you just summarize the results. You discuss the results, conclusions and results, limitations, implications of the studies, and recommendations for future research. And so, chapter 5, okay, so let me go back. So chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3 and chapter 4, sometimes there were points where I wanted to write up the way I felt about the things that I was seeing and all of that stuff. You can't do that in those chapters. We don't want to know that stuff in those chapters. We just want to know the findings, the existing literature, everything you found during the study. Chapter 5 is where you get to kind of say, yeah, all this kind of stuff came up, and I was thinking this, and I didn't know why this. You can talk about that stuff in chapter 5. Again, I hear my mentor here saying, yeah, that's chapter 5 stuff. That's chapter 5 stuff. Hey, mentor. Anyway, so those are the 5 chapters, and there's an abstract, of course. And like I said, each school has different requirements for these things. So this is just kind of my experience with what I've had. And now I just want to talk from the experiences that I've had. What I saw during my journey, like I said, people, when they should have been focusing on developing a topic and they weren't, they didn't come to class prepared with a topic already established or already in their mind that they can get tweaked and work on during those times that we were working on those. That's one key. Make sure you work on that topic and the research question. Those are important because if you don't understand those and you don't get a grasp on that right away, it's going to be difficult to write about them. It's going to be difficult to write chapter 2 if you don't understand your research problem and your topic. And I stated this earlier, don't argue with your dissertation mentor, your professor, because you do that, that's going to prolong your time in the dissertation program, because you're trying to argue something you don't know about. You may be saying, oh, I want to use this theoretical orientation like I did when I had one in mind, but once I started working with my mentor and I realized that's not the best theoretical orientation for this study. And so then I reworked that. And now I could probably, as a PhD, I know I could go out and I could do a dissertation all over again now. But the key thing that I did, I was patient. I worked when I didn't feel, when I was waiting for feedback from my mentor. I continued to work on my dissertation. Whatever next step I needed to do, I would just work on it. Even if it was just drafting a chapter 3 or drafting a chapter 4. I continue to move forward because it's very easy to put the dissertation down. And what I found is if I put it down more than like a few days, it's like starting back all over again. And you don't want to do that. It's time and money and frustration, because you can get frustrated. Expect to get frustrated, but always keep this in mind, and you hear this from Dr. Dare, is you're never finished until you get your degree. And again, don't forget to subscribe to this video, like it, hit the bell so that you'll get notifications. I am going to be uploading things that pertain to mental health, like anger management, test anxiety, depression, even hot topics that are out there about, but they're going to be based on the mental health perspective. So again, hopefully this helps you with your dissertation process. Don't get frustrated. It is a lonely process, but you got to be strong and you just got to continue writing and never give up. And thank you for joining. Subscribe, share. And if you're already writing, write.